With most of our teachers having received walkthroughs at this point, I thought it would be good to show everybody what the walkthrough form looks like from the admin view. That way you can see the options that we have to choose from when we're completing our walkthrough. So we start here with the school. Since we only work here, we can only choose Frederick Douglass, and we choose a grade level. Most of our classes are multi-grade except for the Freshman Academy. And then we would choose the teacher's email, the number of students in a classroom, and the subject area. And for our CTE classes, you'll notice that if I select that, it has a condition after I click next that'll take me to choosing the area of focus in that CTE class and the time in the class. And then here's that cluster area, so maybe engineering. I'll select next. And then it opens up our first section. And this section largely focuses on questioning outcomes, success criteria, and so on. So here we would have the option for no outcome, outcomes posted or evidence, and aligned to a standard or not. And then for each of these options, we're able to give evidence down here. So in some cases, maybe a screen or something's covering it, I can't see it, I just offer that here. Or a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just type whatever your instructional outcome is here. We have whether or not the activity that is viewed is aligned, partially aligned, or not aligned to the actual learning target. And then the assessment criteria. So how do students know that they've achieved a level of mastery of that skill or that standard during that lesson? Is it posted? Is it not posted? Is it evidence? So on and so forth. For the next question, we're looking at questions. And here we have three options. No questions are evidenced, lower blooms or higher blooms. What I like to do is just record your questions here that I hear during the observation so that when I select one of these, you can see the actual questions that I heard that justify these selections. The percentage of students who are actively participating in the activity. We don't get to choose these percentage bands, and it does cause a little bit of confusion. There's a pretty big difference between 51% of students actually participating and 75. But again, we only have these options to choose from, and we were not allowed as a school to change these questions, even though I would have liked to change a few of them. So what I do a lot of times is if I select this, I'll put down here that it's closer to 51 or closer to 75 or something like that, just to give you a little bit more specific feedback. Are teachers engaging with a diverse group of students? Most of our classrooms are fairly heterogeneous, so in most cases it's yes, but if you're calling on the same kid for an answer or something like that, it may be no. So our next question is a question that I would have liked to have changed slightly if given the opportunity, and this one looks at engagement and the level of the task. And you'll notice you have options between low engagement and high engagement, as well as low level task and high level task. But what's missing is anything in between. So it deals just with the extremes. So in some cases, you might have kind of medium engagement. And in that case, I would select either high or low, whichever's closest to what I'm seeing. And then in the evidence, I would write that it's actually more like medium engagement than low or high engagement, just to give you more feedback. But of course, that option isn't offered here. Next, we have an option to add a file. What I like to do is take a picture of whatever you have on your board, your outcome, agenda, success criteria, take a picture of that, and then I add that as a file for my reference as well as yours. And then on the next page, we end up dealing with behavior expectations. So again, like one of our previous questions, this has a range. And again, that range can be very different. 51%, 75%, very different. As 76% to 99%. Is it one kid? Is it 5 kids? This doesn't really tell you. And it's also important to note, too, that the reason why they have questions like this is probably the result of just looking at school-wide data. So when we sit down with the district and talk about walkthrough data, or we sit down as a leadership team and talk about our data, we're not looking at individual teachers. We're looking at the culmination of all those data points for any given metric. So we would be looking in this case at behavior expectations across the school for all observations, or through a particular grade, or over a particular period of time. So those ranges, it's a little bit more appropriate by kind of averaging out all those walkthroughs to analyze the data that way. But for an individual teacher, it's really not great feedback. So what I like to do is select which end of these different spectrums is what I'm seeing in the classroom. So if I'm seeing closer to 75 or closer to 50, I'll put that down here as evidence. The next question deals with percentages of students interacting respectfully with the teacher and with each other. Same thing as before, we have a range. The next one is the use of technology, and generally, technology not available in the room is rarely an option at Douglas. It's going to be one of these three here. Either students are using technology to create something and thus demonstrating their learning, they're writing something, they're creating a model, they're doing a portfolio piece or a project or something, or they're just using it as a resource. So they're looking at your Canvas materials in order to complete something. And then in some cases, technology is not used for that particular learning target, and that's perfectly fine. There's not, in a school we like Douglas, we like to see technology being used, but it's certainly appropriate in some cases not to be using technology. Feedback, it's a yes or no conditional here. Is the teacher interacting with students and giving them feedback to improve their understanding or revise their work? In some cases, I may see, in a walkthrough, just the front-loading of information where a teacher may be giving more procedures and more content and less interactivity. Not to say that you can't give feedback in those circumstances, but it's less likely. So again, this is formative feedback. Take this in the context of what the observer saw and reflect on it that way. So if the context is you're front-loading information and that wasn't the feedback time or the feedback part of your lesson, then you can dismiss that. But if it's kids are working on something and you're walking around and you're not interacting with kids, and if that's a no, then that's something certainly that should change. This question probably causes the most problems, number 12, and that's classroom visuals, materials, resources reflect cultural diversity. In some cases, if I'm in a lab or a math classroom and they have math content or science content on the wall and it doesn't reflect cultural diversity, I think that's probably okay. Certainly, I don't want somebody slapping up a poster of Martin Luther King or something like that as a token nod to diversity, because that really is superficial. But if I'm in an English classroom or a socialist classroom, and certainly the content lends itself to different perspectives, then the room should reflect that. So again, this is one of those questions you have to take the feedback in context. This is certainly a work in progress for Douglas, I think, and that's differentiation. Can I tell from what students are working on if it's the teacher has planned for different students of different ability levels to have different content in front of them or different activities? And so far, I've not seen a lot of that. Generally, all students are working on the same tasks. So just something to think about, and also keep in mind that sometimes it's hard to discern. If you've done heterogeneous grouping and I can't tell if I'm in the classroom, then I may mark differentiation was not evidenced, but you're always welcome to email me back or any of our other walkthrough evaluators and observers to just let them know that what they saw may not be accurate. This is formative feedback, as I've said, so it's not part of your evaluation. Number 14, high yield instructional strategies are evidenced or not. I would prefer if this were kind of a series of radio buttons and I could select what kinds of high yield instructional strategies are used, but that's not the way the question is formatted. It's almost always going to be this one, because generally teachers are doing at least one of these things over the course of the walkthrough, and then I'll put down here which ones I saw, but it would have been easier if it were a radio button. Just my own idiosyncrasy there. And then lastly, the predominant classroom structure: whole group, small group, pairs, partners, independent work. A lot of times I'll see multiple ones. So in this case, I wish they had something that allowed me to select more than one, but they want to see the predominant classroom structure. So if I'm seeing a teacher front-loading information, then go into small group, depending on when am in that classroom, it may be more whole group than small group or independent work. Just again, take it as formative feedback. And then lastly, we hit submit. And so what that does is it creates a PDF and sends you the feedback from our walkthrough. Walkthroughs, the district has said, are about 10 to 12, 15 minutes, but I always found that to be insufficient to give you all good feedback. So if I walk into a classroom to do a walkthrough, it's going to be closer to 20 minutes in order to collect relevant data and offer you something that you can reflect on. As always, you are welcome to email me, contact me, stop by if you have questions about walkthroughs that have been conducted or just about the process in general. I know we can't really change it at this point for this year, but hopefully we'll have opportunities to change it to fit what we need for future years. Thanks.